The views and opinions expressed by the following program are those of the host, guests, and callers and are not necessarily those of this station or Webster Rock Hill Ministries, its management, or other hosts or underwriting sponsors. Programs presented by KWRH-LP are for educational and entertainment purposes only.
We're broadcasting here. It's In Tune with Arnold Stricker and
Ellie Wharton.
And I remembered your name correctly this week.
Thank you, because last week I was trying to figure out who the heck was Ellie Davis. I couldn't figure that out. I was like, come on, Arnold. How long have we been together now?
Well, you know, I was looking and Chris was gone. Welcome back, Chris.
Hey, welcome back, Chris.
And I looked over and I couldn't remember Davo's name for some reason. Sorry,
you had one
Davo.
of those brain freezes,
I had a
right?
brain freeze, and then it was like...
Did you have a slushie or...
a brain slushy. My mouth opened before my hard drive of my brain was engaged.
That's okay. You know, I don't mind being Ellie Davis. It's my new name now.
I've answered to a whole lot worse.
That's right. As I say, I've been called worse things by better people.
I've got to remember that one.
That's right.
No, this is Arnold Stricker with Ellie Wharton.
Wharton, that's right. Exactly. You had to write it down, right?
Yeah, I had to stop and think for a minute.
But you know, it's like when I've done speeches, you know, this sounds so crazy, and I know other people that probably have gotten up there and presented. I actually type my name in. Hello, I am. And I type my name in there because it's nothing worse than getting that brain freeze when you get up there. Hello, I'm your speaker for the day.
Or you're going to acknowledge people and you go, let's see, what's your name again out there?
Exactly.
You know?
Oh, that's so embarrassing.
I worked with you for 80 years. I can't remember your name.
Yeah. We could do just like our president does, you know, just kind of like point the finger like,
Ooh. So we are In Tune, a 2-hour weekly broadcast focusing on issues that impact and connect our community in the greater St. Louis area. We discuss and reflect on issues such as the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, history, housing, humor, and justice. And coming up this week, actually next Thursday, June 14th is Flag Day, and National Flag Week is June 10th through the 16th. So that's all next week.
Okay, so we're going to make a big deal out of that, right? Just like we did Donut Day last Friday.
We might have flags delivered.
That's right. Flags everywhere.
There could be flag cakes.
Are you trying
cookies?
Are you trying to send a hint out to like our friends at Art of Entertaining?
Flag donuts?
Flag donuts, strange donut guys.
You never know.
You know. I do want to do a quick shout out though before we get with Helen. Helen's been in here. She's been grooving with us, so we're going to have a great interview with Helen Berggruen. But I was this morning at a Coffee and Connections at Grafika Fine Arts and Custom Framing on Big Bend and Webster. We had a wonderful time. I want to say hello to Larry and Lynn Bose. When I walked in the door, they had KWRH-LP on the air.
All right.
So, you know, we played it during the Coffee and Connections, gave them a shout out, did the whole thing. So, hey there, Lynn and Larry. Thanks so much for being supporters of the radio station.
Thanks, Lynn and Larry. We appreciate you listening to all of the broadcasts. Don't forget, so June 14th is Flag Day. Also, June 16th coming up is Cleanup Day at Father Dixon Cemetery from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So if you have some time, please contact Ernest over at Father Dixon Cemetery. So we have in-studio guest Helen Berggruen. I met Helen last year out in California. She's from California, and we're going to have her talk a little bit about herself. But
you met a lot of people in California, didn't you? Because we had the guy on from Sonoma Valley. He was calling in from California, and now Helen.
You're right.
You know, this is great.
Helen's an artist, and
no, she is an artist extraordinaire.
Artiste.
Artiste, that's right. Yeah. Me, I'm an artist. Okay. That should tell you something right there. Okay.
It's not stick figures.
No, hers is not stick figures.
No.
Mine, I have a hard time just even drawing a straight line with a ruler, and I am not joking.
Is your ruler crooked?
Yeah. Goes along with the political climate of the day. Oh, did I say that? Well, we are in tune, aren't we?
We are in tune.
With everything.
Welcome, Helen, to In Tune.
Thank you very much. It is an enormous pleasure to be here. with Ellie and Arnold.
Oh, see? She knows my name. She just got here.
So Helen, we've talked for a long time, and tell the listeners a little bit about who you are, because we have the entire hour to talk about art and your background and things that are important to you. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, let's see. I was born in San Francisco.
You mean there were really people born in San Francisco?
Yes, I know it's very unusual.
It's very unusual. You're probably like the only one I've ever met. And I lived in San Francisco and the Bay Area for 18 years.
Really?
And I really hardly ever met anybody that could say I was from the Bay Area.
Yes, it's true. There are very few of us who are actually born there and who are still there. Because, yeah. Anyway.
Because you all are the only ones that can afford to live there now. Okay.
I think that's exactly it. Anyway, I have lived a lot of other places, and traveling is one of the things I do for my art. And because a lot of what I do is based on drawings that I do when I travel, right? While I'm here, I'm working on a drawing of Arnold's living room.
Oh, I bet you that's exciting. I've been to Arnold's living room and never really thought of it as but hey, but art is in the mind, the eye of the beholder. Right?
But when you look at Helen's art, she does a lot of interior scenes of rooms that kind of look out a window.
Yes.
Into the beyond.
Oh, and you're right. Your room does do that, doesn't it? You have a beautiful view.
Yes, there are arches there. There are archways leading into stairways.
I do remember that about your house, that there were these lovely archways.
So that's it.
That's wonderful. And I love the texture of the art here. Saying that you were from California, when I looked at this one particular piece of art makes me think of like Fresno, Sonoma, and those kind of rural areas of California. But then up here, I start to look at things that I would see from the wine country. I mean, it shows me so much of that era, and it's very homey. It's very like you feel like you want to just jump right into the painting and take a seat. And
you've done a lot of work up in painting from farm fields in Iowa and in France, and
yes, I can see that.
That's where a lot of these views come from.
I can see that.
Yeah, actually, one time I had a show in Berlin, which I'm about to have another show in Berlin, and the show was reviewed, and the critic said, "Well, one thing about these paintings, you can't really tell whether it's France or California or Germany or whatever." And I realized that the paintings each start in a place, but then they develop later in the studio, and then you don't really know where they are, but there's something that connects them all, and it's not really about where they are, but where the viewer might place themselves and be able to imagine some other little world that they could go into. That's my hope when I paint these things.
Now, Helen, talk a little bit about how when you're thinking about something, or you do a lot of sketching, and do certain sketches or certain scenes, are they imprinted in your mind, and then you go, I think I'm going to paint that?
Well, I'll give you an example, since it's kind of rural. It's a rural Midwestern example. I was in Northeast Iowa for a while because I had been commissioned to do a series for a show, and so I was going around to different farms, and then I would just see something that caught my attention, a certain silo, or the way the hills ran, and I planted myself on the edge of a field and started painting. I was doing plein air painting right on site with little canvases, and suddenly a big truck drives up, and I say, oh, I'm on somebody's property, I'm going to get into trouble. And the farmer comes out and comes walking towards me, and I was like, oh, excuse me, I'm on your land. He said, oh, no, it's fine. I just want to know what made you stop here and choose this subject matter to paint. What is it? What's here that you're looking at? And I explained. I said it was the way that the angles of the corn, rows were, and the way that the soybeans were, and the way the silo, in a relatively flat landscape, the silo just like sticks up in this monumental way. And then he explained to me that with soybeans go that way and the corn goes that way because it's to control erosion, and so the name of that show became The Aesthetics of Practicality.
Practically for him to keep erosion down, but for you it was a visual thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's cool. And I know, is that one called soybeans and corn?
Well, as a matter of fact, yes, Arnold.
I like that she's right to the point, huh? What is this? Soybeans and corn. I got that. Because you know how you go in sometimes, and Helen, you've got to admit this. We go to these exhibitions, and you stand in front of these abstracts, and everybody stands in front of the abstract kind of like, I see, They don't really know what they see, right? But they don't want to admit that they don't see
right
what's in there. So I can appreciate it being labeled just what it is.
Right. It's interesting, though. There's another one, one of my newer paintings, which is it's adapted from a 19th century lithograph with a train in the background and train tracks, and then the main thing in the painting is a man with a box, a mysterious box, and a long pole, and he's reaching up to what seems to be the telegraph wires, maybe, or something, and something's going on there. And I told somebody, well, in the original little black and white lithograph, it was called sending out the distress signal from the train. The train obviously had gotten stuck, and he's doing some. And then I thought, no, I'm going to make it. My approach is more upbeat. I'm going to call it the all clear signal.
There you go.
And then somebody else looked at it, a kind of art dealer, who said, no, don't call it anything like that. Just call it the signal, and let the people see that there's some mysterious thing going on that has to do with, some little telephone wires, and we let them figure it out. And that way it invites them, the viewer, more into the discovery process.
Which would precipitate a conversation with the artist to ask, well, what was the source of that, and which is another story then. But I understand that, where you really invite the visual. I was going to say invite the listener in, but musicians do that, composers do that, but artists invite you in visually to something like that, and I can see that. Talking about music, there's a link in what you do with music, because you have a musical and a theater background.
Yes.
I know you actually were an actress for several years.
Yes, that is true. And so that I was an actress for a long time. And actually, anyway, and but I gave that up and just started really focusing in on painting. But in more recent years, I've really returned to music, and in particular to opera. And I have really been just feeling the parallels between aspects of music and visual art, like, composition or harmony and dissonance and things like that.
Timbre. We talked about that last year in California, that music and art have very similar conceptual ideas.
Absolutely.
They may name them a little differently, but the idea is the same.
And it is to paint a picture, to tell a story, and to evoke an emotion from the viewer. And one of the things that I was noticing about you, I find that this is a tremendous statement. You said that as artists, as members of a society, we find ourselves faced with the challenge how to resist being dragged down into the negative, fearful despair that surrounds us. Given what we are seeing, this week, the United States lost two. I mean, I know there were many other people that were lost this week, but this one really shook me. Today, Anthony Bourdain committing suicide at 61. I was just blown away. Actually, when I picked up my phone this morning and looked at it, which I told you I don't want to do that first thing in the morning, but I did. I had to dash my phone down on the ground between him and then Kate Spade. This week, I was thinking, my goodness, there's such despair. These are people that are, accomplished and well, thought about. Why would they take their life? And you said it, despair. How do you as artists keep from falling into that?
Oh, my goodness. Well, yeah, okay, I'm just going to, I would like to read a little something about a project that I've just done that I'm really proud of.
Okay.
Because what you just read there, I loved hearing you read it.
Oh,
I did. Is the beginning of a paragraph about a project that I'm participating in called Project Peace, and it was organized by Elizabethtown College in Western Pennsylvania, and it's a coordinated effort between German and American artists. And there was a show of German artists in Pennsylvania. Now the American artists in this project are going to Stuttgart and having a show. And the theme is, well, it's called Project Peace, and it has to do with war and peace. And I chose to paint a painting which I'm now going to tell you about. And one of the things that I'm really influenced right now is music, as I said. So this painting involves an angel and a singer, and it's influenced very much by a visionary series of concerts, which is called In War and Peace, that was launched a couple of years ago by the American mezzo-soprano Joyce DiDonato, who comes from Kansas City, not far from here. And so, but she is now an internationally renowned opera singer, and she sings Baroque music as well as other music, and was determined to do something throughout the world that had to do with addressing issues of war and peace. And so this is the inspirations for that painting. And since it's a recent project that I'm involved in, I just want to read it. So in this case, through the sublime music of Handel, Purcell, and other Baroque masters, the concerts called In War and Peace explore the darkest conditions of the human soul as well as the most exalted. We hear searing melodies set to words crying out for revenge, but also melodies conveying a sense of hope. The scourge of war is interwoven with a craving for peace. And then I say the second source of this painting that I did is a painting called Saint Cecilia and the Angel, and that's from a 17th century Italian painting by somebody named Saraceni. And in my narrative composition, Saint Cecilia and her lute, I guess she always used to be portrayed with a lute, but in this case, Saint Cecilia and her lute have been replaced by a determined young singer. The angel beckons to the singer, and she has already embarked on a fierce mission. In one hand, she holds a sheet of music, and in the other, she carries a blazing torch. And the winged angel, who's looming over the singer, he is carrying a bass viol. Is that how you say it? Anyway, like a stand-up bass, but the Baroque kind. The winged angel joins the singer, offers to accompany her on his bass viol, and together their song vanquishes dark forces, and hostilities cease, and swords lie broken at their feet.
I love that. You could just read that over and over and over. Just gives me goosebumps.
Yes, thank you.
It's very much in the social realism a little bit.
Genre, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when you look at the colors of it, the angel, the winged angel is in like a red scarlet red. She is in emerald green. So you're looking at the colors which stand out so tremendously in this painting, because really the background is really kind of dark, muted colors. But boy, do these costumes stand out and make both of the characters in here even that much more attractive. You look at it and you're drawn to it.
Thank you, Ellie.
I think this is a marvelous piece. Absolutely marvelous. And looking at the broken swords at their feet is such a tremendous political statement, because we're really saying, it's time to put an end to these hostilities, to this terror that we're existing under. Take it and put it at our feet. Let it be gone.
Amen.
And celebrate the songs of life. Did I just make that up?
Yeah, wow.
That's recorded now.
That is recorded. But that's what this piece did for me. Just looking at it, it inspired me in that way.
Now, would you have gotten that without Helen's background information on that?
Probably not. That really helped. And I find that to be the case for me just because I am not an aficionado when it comes to art, but I love art. Sometimes having this little bit of background information helps me to be able to understand what was going on, what's the history behind it, versus just looking at it going, that's nice. I see an angel and the woman's got some music in her hand, and then, and I know nothing about the background. This really laid it out for me. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. You're the ideal audience, I have to say.
I try to be.
Don't pat yourself on the back so hard.
That's right, exactly. I might knock myself into the microphone.
One of the things I found about Helen's work is the vivid colors that she uses in her paintings. And whether it's a landscape painting or whether it's a room painting or this particular one, this newest work that you've shown us, they're just very vivid colors and draw you in. And Ellie, do you see a Van Gogh-ish kind of influence there?
I do. I like that Van Gogh-ish kind of what I always said, the wavy kind of look, that really I think pulls you in because it provides texture to the painting. It's not just a surface look, but you are drawn in by that texture. I'm looking even down to this one particular painting where there's pomegranates on the table. They've even gotten down to showing us the seeds versus the meat of the pomegranate, which makes you again want to reach right out and go, oh, I can, I can have that. They've cut it open for me. It's prepared for me. But I particularly like the one where they are in a library. There's a cat sitting on a desk looking out the window, and this lovely library, this corner library full of books with this fabulous, and again, these colors, the love seat, emerald green with scarlet red pillows. Just fabulous. I mean, I could see myself sitting there all day.
Now, Helen, I have to ask you, do you ever change the colors of what you see at a location like that and to put it into something like what Ellie was talking about so you get this contrasting look, or do you just go with what you see? Loaded question.
That was a loaded question.
I kind of think you can guess the answer, frankly. Absolutely. In almost every case, the colors have very little to do with what was originally there. Although I do believe my friends had a beautiful velvet kind of love seat that was a very rich green in that case. But otherwise, yeah, things tend to there's a lot more yellow in everything that I...
Well, what I see in your style also in the colors is, when we look out, unless you're really paying attention to life, you miss many, many things. You don't hear things, you don't see things. You've taken time to look at something, and when you look at one of Helen's paintings, you have to observe it over several times to see everything in the painting. And it's not something that's straight cut lines. There are straight lines there, maybe using kind of Ellie's ruler, but
yeah, that's right.
But they're not. It's like life's not cut and dried all the time. Life has some flex to it, and things that are vivid, many times we miss. And they may be simple, like a couch or like a cat sitting on a desk looking out the window. We might ignore that and just be looking at something else. But that's a very simple thing that really reflects a different kind of perspective on living.
And I think when you said, Helen, that you use a lot of yellows, I can definitely see that in your paintings. I see this one particular one I'm looking at. It is a kitchen setting, looks like a farmhouse, a rural farmhouse, but it has so much intricacy on it. You know, I mean, even with the teacup sitting very perilously close to the edge of the table, you know, by the knife, by the pat of butter, by the milk jar, by the they've got jam on the table. I mean, you look at every little thing on there, and it's like, and then every time you look, you see more, and you see more. Oh, and look over there, they've got fruit. Oh, and look, there's a woman coming through the door. Oh, and you know, it really makes you almost fall into the frame, and you are there.
Yes, you're part of the painting, looking in.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. And it's rare to find art that really kind of pulls you in and makes you feel like you're a part of the actual picture itself. And this does. Was that like intentional?
Well, all I can say is I am so happy to hear you say that, because I do want to invite the viewer. So that's the main thing, is to invite the viewer to be part of whatever this is, to leave room in the painting for the viewer.
Well, we want to invite everybody to stay tuned to what we're talking about. We're going to talk more with Helen Berggruen. This is Arnold Stricker with Ellie Wharton of In Tune. You're listening to KWRH-LP 92.9 FM, your community radio station in Webster Groves, Missouri. We're having a good time on In Tune here. Arnold Stricker with Ellie Wharton and Helen Berggruen.
We might as well make Helen just a regular. I mean, she just melds right in.
She's a moving and a grooving with us.
I do what I can.
And Chris was kind of getting into it back there, for a New Yorker. He was doing pretty good. That was... The audience had to see that he did the, what's the thing that the kids always do when they are shown, during the ball games and stuff like that? They kind of make that funny face where they snarl, and then their hands go up with the two fingers, the four fingers. I wish people could see that.
Duck face and deuces.
Ah.
It actually has a name.
It does. It does.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either. See, that's why people need to listen to In Tune, because every Friday they're going to learn something new.
On the cutting edge.
Yeah, we are on the cutting edge. Speaking of cutting edge, though, I tell you, Helen Berggruen, this woman is on the cutting edge.
She is. And, we were talking off air about how we met. And one of the things I like to peruse eBay. I don't know if other people like to peruse eBay, and I like art, so I happen to see this. I have a listing, Regionalist, and this book appeared as a neo-regionalist painter, And I pulled that up, and I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And look at that. Wow, I've never seen that kind of art before. That's really nice. And it was out of a gallery in Berkeley, California, George Kresge Gallery. And so I was like, well, that's really neat. And we happened to go out to Sonoma County last summer with some friends. And I called George up and said, George, is it possible to meet this artist that's in this catalog that you have? You've obviously done some exhibitions of her work. He said, yeah, she doesn't live too far from where you're going to be staying. So he arranged it, and my wife Amy and I, we met Helen. We spent about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes at her studio talking, and she was so gracious. And I was just full of a bunch of questions about art and how she approaches the canvas and what she is looking for when she sees things. Because you compare, I like to compare what I hear from different artists, and I hear similarities sometimes, and sometimes I hear differences, but it's always interesting. It's just like talking to a composer, if you can talk to some, you know?
And I will say that by the end of that visit, because we were talking about the parallels of music and painting, that Arnold decided to pick up his clarinet again after some time.
Really?
I did. I saw a cello in the corner of a studio area, and I said, "Do you play cello?" And she goes, "Oh, I haven't played for a long time." So we started talking about music, and I said, "Well, I haven't played my clarinet for a long time either." And then come to find out that Helen was taking some voice lessons and singing in a chorus, and was really likes opera. And my sister-in-law is the education director at Opera Theater St. Louis.
I know, and we have had her on the air several years ago. Before we actually came on the air, I interviewed Allison Felter, and that was my exposure, my first exposure to Opera Theater St. Louis. I hate to say that I was that unaware, and now I am hooked. I am hooked on Opera Theater St. Louis. People really don't realize the gem that we have right here. And what I like about the opera is that it is in English. It's sung in English so that, you kind of know what's going on. But it also has what we would probably call closed caption up on the screens. So if you don't understand what's being sung, you can see it right up there on the screen, which helps people understand the opera much, much better and really get into the stories.
And Helen is here to see some operas also.
Yes, and so that was my first experience last night at Opera Theater of St. Louis, and I was mightily impressed.
Excellent. And I understand you're going to take her around to some of our fabulous art galleries here in Webster.
We're going to go around to some galleries and take some views, and she's going to take in the art museum this afternoon.
Yes, to see the things that were dug up from ancient Egypt out of the water.
That's a really good exhibit. I've been to that one.
Yeah.
And it was truly, very moving. Very, very moving. So, one of the good things about St. Louis, since this is your first time here, you'll find that we have a lot available. A lot of art, a lot of music, a lot of theater available for little to no cost. I grew up going to the Muni Opera down in the Forest Park area, which you're going to go in that area today. And I can remember seeing the most fabulous plays, like Carol Channing and, original Pearl Baileys and, people like that back in the day, because I just dated myself. But, and it was free. If you sat in the back,
Right, the free seats.
The free seats.
Right.
And let me tell you, for the free seats, you better get there early.
Right.
Because a fight could break out.
But going to the zoo, free.
The seat free.
Going to the art museum. Now, there are some special exhibits,
Yes.
but everything's free.
Everything's free. Now, down at the zoo, though, the zoo is free to get in. Where they get you, though, is on the parking. You pay like $30 to park, but the zoo is free. I'm like, okay. But that's kind of a crazy thing.
But I understand that.
I do, too. It's the park.
Well, I can tell from just being here just for 2 days that it's a rich city.
Oh, and wait till you go out to Lohmeyer Sculpture Park.
So these are things, we're kind of teasing her to come back.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
you can't see it all in one.
No,
one
not
trip.
at all. Not at all. But, this is the town for art. And it's amazing, that more and more people don't even realize that, that St. Louis really is like an arts area.
Well, I'm figuring it out.
Well, good. And hopefully we can invite you to come back, and maybe, we have a plein air art. I think that's the first weekend in May. Then we just finished with Webster Arts, which is our huge arts fair. And we have probably 20,000 people to come out for that. That was this past weekend.
Wow.
And wonderful, absolutely wonderful exhibition there. So there's so much, and that's just right here in Webster Groves. The plein air art, and then the next following month is Webster Arts Fair.
So our little visit, it was just a little bit more than a year ago. Matter of fact, when Helen came in, what is today? Friday. When Helen came in Wednesday, that was 1 year to the day when we were out at her studio in California.
Amazing.
And just a conversation about art, about music, about life and spurred a relationship. We communicated via letter and email, and wanted to, and the passions, similar passions about music and opera and those things draw people together. So,
absolutely, the universal language. Well, they're the shared language.
Right.
Yeah, languages.
So how do you, as a budding artist, when you were really getting into being able to sell your work and get it out to galleries, people aren't flocking in to say, hey, knocking on the door, Helen, we'd like to sell some of your work. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I can only talk about what I did and what those times were like, because things have changed a whole lot. Because when I first started seeking out galleries, it was before the internet, or at the very beginning of it. And so now things have changed a lot. But at that time, I was really I was particularly interested in getting into a gallery in New York, because that was, the center of the art world. And so contacts always help. My brother, knew somebody in New York who had a gallery who he thought might be a good fit. So I went to that gallery, and then seemed like maybe. But then after that, many correspondences, rather, on my part. I was, trying to remind that dealer that he, was interested.
Pushing them without shoving them.
Yes, and then some wonderful coincidences, which he was coming out to San Francisco just when I was having a show that had to do with construction vehicles in Paris. Which is a project that I had a lot of fun doing, going around this, ancient city and just painting moments or drawing moments where there was a big, cement truck pouring cement or something. I loved it. Anyway, he ended up having that whole show in New York, and then for years, every 2 years, I'd have a show in New York, but it was a lot of pursuing. But anyway, yeah. So now.
So do you find the art enthusiasts on the East Coast to be different than the art enthusiasts on the West Coast?
Well, so now it's really hard to say, because so much things are viewed on the internet. I mean, that's how Arnold found my work, and a lot of it, the gallery in New York where I showed, there were a lot of people who bought my work who are from Texas, or I have a painting in the Springfield. Is there a town called
Missouri? Mm-hmm.
Springfield, Missouri Museum, for instance, and I don't know how that came about.
Yeah, I see you're also in the Cedar Rapids Museum.
Yep.
Wow, that's amazing. And I've heard Cedar Rapids is a really good town.
It is.
I've heard really good things about Cedar Rapids.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, you've done many shows. We haven't even gone through the litany and the list of shows or museums that have your work. And you do come from an arts family.
Definitely. I definitely come from an arts family. My father was a refugee from Nazi Germany. He went to California. He was fortunate enough to get one of the rare visas to get into the U.S. and to go to California, where he got a scholarship to go to Berkeley.
And that was in 1936?
Yeah.
Wow. In 1936?
Yeah. Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah. And, but after, at the end, he became an American GI, and at the end of the war, he was sent back to Germany to be part of the media, to keep the Nazis out. And so he worked on magazines, because he was a journalist. But what he really wanted to do was open an art gallery in Paris, which is what he did in the early 50s. And it became a very successful gallery where he showed Picasso and Matisse and other, early 20th century modern painters. He told me that he was looking for, what he showed was prints and drawings, and he told me that he wanted to show Matisse's work, and he just looked his name up in the phone book and called him up.
That's pretty good.
Hey, Matisse.
Hey, Matisse.
Hey, Matisse.
What's up?
You have some Prince lying around?
Well, they didn't say what's up back then.
No.
Pourquoi?
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 That's right.
Bonjour, Monsieur Matisse.
Qu'est-ce que c'est?
Comment allez-vous?
Comment allez-vous?
Très bien, merci.
Ah, when? Uh-oh. When? Okay, what was that? That was me passing over the border from France into Spain.
Oh, okay, okay.
You know, when I did go there, and I traveled throughout France and Spain on the train, and it was absolutely delightful. It was such a delightful trip. But I always remember this one thing. I was on my way to Barcelona, and so we had traveled all night through Paris. And at 6:00 in the morning, we got to the border, this wonderful little border station, and all the French people got off, and I was like, okay, man, I'm ready for breakfast. I am like so ready for breakfast. I could eat these people, right? Did eggs and bacon and stuff come out first? No. At 6 a.m., the wine bottle came out first. I was like, this is way beyond me, okay?
Gives new meaning to first things first.
That's right, first things first. But that and the French people, I tell you, they had the best time. They sat there and smoked cigarettes and drank wine at 6:00 in the morning, and I obviously realized I'm missing out on something. I am really missing out on something here. But it was a wonderful experience. And being around the people, I could see where you would be inspired by just the openness of the French people. You know, they are. They're just so, many people think French people could be very cold, you know, but they really are. When you're there, they are some of the warmest, friendliest people ever.
Well, the part of France that I go to is in the south. And then they really are warm.
They are. And actually, I did, when I landed in Paris, I took the train to Nice. And then I went over and I actually stayed in Ez Village, which is the village just before you go into Monaco. And that was a very fascinating. I could see you painting Ez Village, because it's a village that's built up into a mountain. All of everything is built into the mountain, and they were doing that for protection, only to be conquered by the Moors, who climbed up a very, very, very steep mountain and came through the one door that's at the top of the mountain that leads into Ez Village.
Somebody left the door open?
Somebody left the door open. They probably went to walk the dog. I'll be right back.
Did you lock the door last night, honey?
Right, you know. And then all of a sudden, here the Moors are, you know. Hey, I didn't realize you lived here. I do now. But I could see a painting of Ez Village that would just knock everyone's socks off, because just seeing it as it is was tremendous. Just tremendous.
Well, I tend to choose spots that are a little bit more off the beaten path, because if it's the same place, from your description, I think I've been there, and it's very popular tourist.
It is. It's because you don't see that anywhere. Yeah. You know, you don't see that kind of, you know, people built it right into the mountain. So their homes, you open the door and then you're basically going underground. You know, it was just fascinating. Wow. I had never seen anything like that before. And the history behind it was just unbelievable.
Interesting. So your dad, he had contact with a lot of famous artists.
He did. And I think his gallery became a center of exchange between artists. I know that I heard, you know, that the Dadaists would play chess against each other in his gallery, and it was an era where a lot of different people, interesting people, came through there in the 50s and 60s. So, yeah. And then basically I didn't see him much growing up because I was in California. And but as an adult, especially after I started painting, we established a close relationship. And in his life, he kind of came full circle, because like most German Jews, he kind of stayed away from Germany for years and years after the war. I mean, except when he was in the media. But he went back when the wall came down. He had by then had a significant art collection, and the German government, specifically the Berlin government, invited him to come, and they built this. They turned a building into a museum that houses his collection, and I will confess that one of the reasons why I love showing my work in Berlin is that he was highly regarded. He's no longer with us, but he was a presence in his museum. He lived upstairs, and he'd come down and wander around. He was like in his 90s, and talk to people and tell them stories about the different paintings, and people really admired the fact that he chose to bring his work back to the country that had really, done so many terrible things to people. And but for him, it was where he was born and raised, and also at that time he thought, well, this is one of the most democratic countries in the world. Certain, yeah. So
that's very interesting. Culture, when it destroys itself, and running over other culture. We're talking about the Moors in France, and whether the Germans in World War II and doing the things that they were doing, running over people, you lose a sense of who you are from if you don't have reflections of culture in art or art in culture, which is kind of like the chicken and the egg. Does art influence culture, or does culture influence art, or both? And being able to grasp certain works and see them, brings more of a humanity back into life, rather than that's just some painting on the wall, or that's just some composition that's being played. There's life that's gone into it. When you go to visit an artwork, it's like visiting a child. Or when you go listening to a composition that somebody wrote, it's like listening to a part of who you are, because it is a part of who you are. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, what can I say after that, Arnold? That was...
Arnold's he's so up there.
Oh,
He's just so up there.
I can't get out of the room. My head's so big.
That was eloquent. Well, I will say that this brings to mind something that I heard when at some point when my father, he was quite elderly, and before he took his work to Berlin for a while, there was a show of his collection at the big art museum in London, the National Gallery. And so I went to the opening for that. It was a pretty special occasion. And the director of the museum said that during the Second World War, all the paintings were put in underground shelters, or in some cases taken out of the big cities, except for one painting. They had one painting which they would bring out and have on display, maybe one day a month or something like that. And they said just so many people would brave the Blitz and everything else to come and see this painting. And
beauty in the midst of destruction.
There you have it.
And it shows you how that love of expression, overcame the fear of oppression. Did I just say that?
Say that again.
Wait a second. Let me write that one down.
Oh, yeah.
I tell you, the love of expression. Are you writing this down, Chris? Let's get this. Okay. The love of expression
overcame the fear of oppression.
That's really, wow. Now who is really...
Don't say I'm heavy. You don't ever say that to a woman, okay?
Who is really interesting in what she's saying.
That's
right.
I'm light. Okay. We don't want to be heavy.
A light comment with a heavy message.
There you go. And I was reading here because you were telling me about taking Helen to Opera Theater St. Louis last night, which I'm a huge fan of Opera Theater St. Louis. But she was writing in here about another opera where she was talking about Mozart's opera Guardarmi, sung by Sesto in the opera La Clemenza de Tito. And is that Titus? That was Titus
here.
That's Titus.
Yes.
Okay, and we saw Titus last year. And exactly what you wrote about is what I saw in Titus, was that you said, I remember that Mozart's opera ends in spite of betrayal and demands for revenge, with the most magnanimous kind of forgiveness. I was in tears last year when I saw Titus, because it was like, the king had the opportunity to totally destroy his best friend who had betrayed him. And instead, he showed forgiveness. And when you look at the way the world is today, it's like that type of message just has to resonate with us, that, we have to be in that mode of forgiveness in order to move on and to evolve as humans. So it was wonderful to see that again, because I recognized that message when I read this.
Wow.
Are we like too heavy? I mean, let me just.
No, you're so eloquent, both of you. I'm very moved by hearing what you both have to say.
Well, forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you.
That's right. Absolutely. And that was what that opera really showed, because that king had every right to do away with his best friend who betrayed him horribly. But again, his love, that love of expression overcame the fear of oppression, and he was able to forgive.
It's an interesting conversation we've been having with Helen Berggruen, artist from California. And Helen, we really appreciate you coming in. I've been looking forward to having you here in studio and talking to you and having our listeners get to know you and encourage them to get to know your work. And they can check that out online. You have your own website. And just hit some of the images. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, people have to go up and look at this. They are just going, when they click on her work, they're going to go straight for the checkbook. I'm telling you, they're going to go straight for the checkbook.
Well, hopefully sometime I'll have a show right here in St. Louis. That would be my goal. But anyway, it's been such a pleasure to talk to both of you today. Thank you so much for having me on the air.
Well, we really appreciate you being here. And again, we're going to be talking more in our next hour, actually to a phone interview. I'm not going to tell you what, because you have to stay tuned for
That's
In Tune.
right.
This
Stay
is
tuned.
Arnold Stricker of In Tune. You're listening to KWRH LP 92.9 FM, your community radio station in Webster Groves, Missouri. Welcome back to In Tune. We're glad that you joined us for the second hour. Ellie, what do you think about that first hour?
I was just talking to Helen in the hallway and just telling her what a wonderful inspiration she has been today. As we think about all of the opportunities to view art that we have just right here in Webster. I mean, if you go into Old Webster, if you go into Old Orchard, you've got so much just right here. Not to mention going into the city, to the art museums and everything that we have. Again, one of my favorite places, Lohmeyer Sculpture Park. I go out there in the mornings and walk all through the woods and just enjoy what I see in the sculptures. So having this artist here today from California was absolutely fabulous.
When you talk about culture, when you talk about art, music, sculpture, all those kinds of things that we maybe take for granted. I know we take them for granted, because if we didn't have them, what kind of people would we be?
Very bland, very boring. I think it's the whole thing of art that really brings us to life. It gives us that inner expression that we really are looking for. And I think that people of any age and any persuasion would all enjoy art, one form or another. And so we're seeing so much of an evolution of art. I was just at this morning at Coffee and Connections at Graphica Fine Arts and Custom Framing, and I was talking to Marilyn Bradley, who we've had on the air here, and everybody knows Marilyn as being like the artist extraordinaire of Webster Groves, and how she herself is changing her style. She has a whole geometric area that she's now gone from more of the landscaping, the century homes, that type of look, to now a geometric, which are just all lines. It's so interesting. At 80 years old, here's an artist saying, let me try something brand new.
It keeps you sharp.
It does.
It keeps you encouraged and just creative.
And engaged. It keeps the brain engaged.
Absolutely.
It helps to ward off things like Alzheimer's and what's that other thing that happens to you when you get old? Oh, okay, I was just joking. But it does. It wards off all of those kinds of things.
Well, we really enjoyed having Helen on, and we're going to shift gears a little bit here and talk about something that's a little more serious, something that as I was investigating this and reading up on this, I was like, you got to be kidding me. Holy smokes. And I know that many times we hear news and we think, well, it's not in my neighborhood, or that's something that, that's on another part of the state, or that's in another part of the country. Folks, this is something that just should impact everyone when we talk about this story. We're talking about Karen Nickel and Dawn Chapman are on the line for an interview. They're from Just Moms-STL, and they are a nonprofit organization to talk about the legacy of what's going on in St. Louis as it relates to radiation and the remnants of radiation. And ladies, welcome to In Tune.
Hi, thank you for having us. Hello.
Hey, can you tell us a little bit about your story, because you live up in North County, and give us a little background on who you are and why you have both joined together to form this organization, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the details there.
Okay, so this is Karen. I grew up in Hazelwood in North County as a child, and in 2012, I had learned about the role St. Louis played in the Manhattan process in making of the atomic bombs that we dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And I learned about this by attending a meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers, who comes out to the community twice a year to inform the community on how and where they are on the cleanup of radioactive waste that had been allowed to leak into Coldwater Creek, and the sites from Malincrot downtown to the airport site at Lambert Field, and then moved again to Laddie Avenue in Hazelwood. I was directly downwind growing up from the Laddie Avenue site, and also had the Coldwater Creek in my neighborhood. And most of the North County people probably know that Coldwater Creek has a history of flooding repeatedly. There was a park on the banks of the creek, and if anybody's watched Atomic Homefront, the HBO movie about the Manhattan Project legacy in St. Louis, you would see a scene in there of a park, which is St. Sin Park, that the Army Corps of Engineers were cleaning up. That is the park that was right down the street from my house, and I spent many, many, many days in that park, sucking honeysuckle off the banks of the creek, playing softball, snow sledding, and that creek had been contaminated with radioactive waste and would come out of its banks often, and had eventually contaminated the park. And now they are finding, by testing some homes in that neighborhood, that it is in their backyards now. You have to keep in mind that when this creek flooded, it went up into people's homes and got inside their homes up to the first floor of their home. So this is a very serious issue of widespread contamination across the St. Louis area, either directly from Coldwater Creek or downwind from one of these sites, or directly from Westlake Landfill or Weldon Spring. Fast forward to 2012, I was diagnosed with lupus when I was about 38, and lupus is an autoimmune disease. I had gotten really sick and was talking with my rheumatologist, and it could be an environmental trigger that could relate to lupus. And then at that point, I had to find out what was going on, and I attended a meeting, and I was listening to the fact that there was poison in the creek that was right down the street from my house. And by the end of that meeting, my first thought was, wow, is this really my life? What is going on here? But I had met with Ed Smith from the Missouri Coalition for the Environment, and he was passing out flyers that talked about a landfill that was contaminated with the same waste, which was illegally moved and dumped from the Laddie Avenue site to the Westlake landfill. And lo and behold, I live 1.8 miles away from the Westlake landfill and had already been raising my children for the past 17 years, 1.8 miles away from the same radioactive waste that potentially made me sick as a child. So I started investigating, and through that investigating, I ended up attending an air sampling event held across from the landfill, and Dawn Chapman was there. She had gotten wind of this situation with the fire, and we both met, and we spent about 3 hours talking in my driveway on a very, very, very cold January day. And we were so engrossed in this conversation that it didn't occur to us to go inside and talk about it. But we've been joined at the hip ever since. I am the founder of the Westlake Landfill Facebook page. There's 22,000 people on there. We formed Just Moms-STL because at one point we started holding community meetings once a month, and we were taking up collections for whatever we thought we may need in the future. And we were told that we needed to be thinking of a name and being held accountable for the money we were collecting and whatnot. So Just Moms-STL was created because that's what we are. We are just moms, and that's how it started. And Dawn and I have been joined at the hip, and we're in for the fight of a lifetime here, trying to protect and save our children and the children of our community, and really St. Louis as a region, because there could be the possibility of a catastrophic event at this landfill that could potentially harm and affect the St. Louis, St. Charles area widespread.
And just so listeners know, Coldwater Creek runs from an area that's, I would say, north of Lambert Field, St. Louis Lambert International Airport, getting the right name there, and it meanders through North County and borders St. Ferdinand Park, one of the largest parks in Florissant. And
actually,
go ahead.
Sorry, actually, many parks. There are many parks that were built on the banks of this creek. There
you are. Okay, and kids are constantly playing there because they're open areas, large areas. There's usually playground equipment there, and the creek meanders into the Mississippi River. And then the Laddie site, or let me back up. There's a site that's called, what is it, Slaps? Is that correct?
Yeah, the St. Louis Airport site, yes.
That's an area that is right at the headwater of the Coldwater Creek area, which is on McDonnell Douglas Boulevard. It's between Lindbergh and Natural Bridge, about halfway there. So material from, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, material from Malincrot was dumped there on top of the ground, and then it was moved eventually sometime to Laddie Avenue, which is over, just giving people reference point, about Frost and Interstate 170.
Correct.
And then material was moved to the landfill at roughly 70 and 270, kind of out St. Charles Rock Road area there.
That's right. Across from, if anybody's aware, Hussman Refrigeration.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So, when I went back and went through the chronology that I saw on your website, because I'm on your website right now, and it says time the EPA has risked public safety: 27 years, 282 days, 12 hours, 16 minutes, and 16 seconds.
And right now, we're looking at an EPA that is, in my estimation, I feel is totally against humanity. When I see all of the regulations that are being just thrown away, being able to to dump coal ash directly into the ground versus having a liner. I mean, all these kinds of things. When I look at the poisoning of the Ohio River Valley, by Teflon, we know who that part, DuPont. And we go and we look again and again. And this situation has been going on for years. For years and years. And now we have an administration that is not friendly to the environment. How do we galvanize ourselves to fight against this type of encroachment upon our health and upon the safety of our families?
Well, I think that's actually an excellent point because, while this administration, this EPA administration, Administrator Pruitt, has chosen Superfund, the program, and the Superfund sites as a way to that's kind of his pedestal. That's what he's working on, and to fight for the communities that have been exposed at these sites, which Westlake is one of them. At the same time, we do have to ask ourselves, while they are focusing on the sites that already exist like ours and are putting people at risk, are they creating conditions that are going to make more Westlake landfills in the future? The worst thing for us, and just as a mom speaking here, we raise our kids here. We're scared. We're furious. We see illness. We see the fact that, yes, the risk is there and it's been there for decades and it's been acknowledged and nothing has happened. For me personally, the worst thing is to think that there's another mom maybe 20, 30 years down the road that's going to wake up like I did one day and have her little snow globe of a world crushed because she's living next to one of these sites that nobody told her about, or one that is just being discovered that she's been allowed, like Karen did, to raise her kids next to for decades. So I think that that's what's so exhausting about this fight. And what Just Moms does is we don't just wake the community up about what's happening now, and get everybody together and work towards a fix. But we do have to walk a fine line and be careful and educate people and say, hey, this is a consequence. We are dealing with a consequence from decades ago. The sins of the past have come to haunt us, and we have to be careful in everything we do that we don't create the same legacy for somebody else years down the road, whether it be radioactive waste or, like you mentioned, coal ash. And so while it's very difficult for us to fight the other things because we're so in on this one, we use the opportunity and the platform we've been given to address these issues and to hopefully teach the lesson.
Well, and to amplify what you're talking about, the sins of the past coming back and now manifesting themselves. Folks out there, what we're talking about is cancer. And we're not just talking about, these ladies, Karen and Dawn, are just not talking about, radiation in my backyard. Well, what is the result of that? Well, all of that water that hits the stuff that's been piled up outside for years and years and years has run into the creek. It's into the ground, and now people have it in their houses. But the manifestation of that in lives is brain cancer, is premature births, leukemia, all different kinds of cancer. And this has all been tracked, and this is information that's all been given to the government. And I guess another thing I would say about this is it's easy to say, oh, there was a great thing, the war ended early because of, they used the atomic bomb, however people want to think about that. But like you said, there's always consequences of something that's going on. And the decisions that have been made, and you go back and you read this chronology, the decisions that were made back from 1942 forward. So, every administration, every form of government that was put into place, every administrative group like the EPA, which before that they were something else, or the Atomic Energy Commission, or all these groups, they all have been, well, that's not me. Well, that's not me. And they go to this, talk to this organization. We're not in charge of that. And nobody wants to claim ownership because ownership is responsibility.
And action. Action is and I was just looking something up. Arnold and Dawn and
Karen,
how many environmental rules have are either out or on the way out under our current administration? Take a guess, Arnold. How many do you think?
1,000.
Not quite that much. Close, but not that much. Karen and Dawn, do you have an idea of how many?
We don't, and it's interesting because it changes just about every day. Every day you get on the news.
Well, listen to this. There are 67 environmental rules on the way out under this administration. 33 rules have been overturned. 24 rollbacks are in progress, and 10 rollbacks are in limbo. Now, the ones that are in limbo, listen to the ones that are in limbo. Wetland and tributary protections. Okay. Methane emission limits at a new oil and gas well. Limits on landfill emissions. These rollbacks are in limbo. So it's like they're just sitting there. Okay, yeah, we've got this situation. We've got this landfill emission. We're just going to sit on it for a little while longer.
Well, but that's right. To me, that's and ladies, you can amplify on this. That's no different than what's been going on the last 50 years.
That's true. You know, you talked about the illnesses and whatnot, and in relation to the war, and no matter how people feel about the win or loss of that, our community is still suffering casualties from the war, and this isn't just it isn't just affecting those that were actually exposed to this stuff, but it affects generations, and it's multi-generational that these families are suffering from with, like you did say, there's a high emphasis on cancers, but excuse me, you also have birth defects, and I can't even tell you how many autoimmune diseases and rare autoimmune diseases. Appendix cancers are off the chart, and probably one of the rarest forms of cancer.
Never heard of that.
And so we're still suffering from the victory. Maybe I can't really. My quote is always, "We will never win this battle because we will always suffer from this, and we will have small victories along the way, but at the end of the day, we don't win." When your family has been exposed and you are sitting on a time bomb of waiting to find out if your family's if somebody in your family is going to end up with cancer or an autoimmune disease. I have 4 kids. What are my odds that not one of them will end up with something? We have families, streets upon streets of people. The entire street has lost due to cancers and illnesses, where both parents have passed away and 2 or 3 of the siblings have passed away. This is long and widespread, and when you're talking about the EPA being in this fight right now, Coldwater Creek has already happened. Weldon has already happened. Westlake is in the making. And not only are we dealing with the radioactive waste legacy at Westlake, we have this underground fire burning, and it is putting off its own cocktail of chemicals that we are subjected to 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And Dawn and I have worked so hard to try to get this information out, and our goal was always to put the facts out there and let people make decisions based on what they see and learn from factual information. It's a very difficult issue. We are, like Dawn said, we're scared and we're worried about our kids, but at the same time, we feel trapped in our environment because, we're not wealthy people. We can't just up and leave. It's not as easy as that. So there are so many factors that go into what's going on currently with the Westlake landfill.
I think one of the biggest things that has disappointed me in reading the information, it's not in your information, it's disappointed me about the responsibility that our government has taken. They haven't taken any. And I remember a quote that said, government should be part of the solution, not the problem.
Absolutely.
That's true. And I think across the nation, not just here in St. Louis, but across the nation, like at Rocky Flats and other sites, this material was disrespected, and the government just disrespected it and did whatever they want without caring, maybe, or thinking about or maybe knowing what the consequences were going to be long term.
So
and it's interesting.
Go ahead.
Because this is done. Last night I spent 4 hours from 6:30 to about 10:30 on the phone with another mom from Weldon Spring, who's just now starting her own group, Chasing Answers. Did Weldon Make Us Sick? The Facebook page. But I tell you, our stories, we're not alone in this battle. Weldon happened, and so they're just now, their community, their former graduates are waking up to illnesses. It's heartbreaking. It really is, because here's another mom whose world has just been shattered. This is the truth across the nation. And so back to the EPA, what Ellie was saying, with the regulations and whatnot, it's hard to think that you can change a heart, right? But at the end of the day, the people running EPA, Scott Pruitt, these people, they are human beings like you and I. And they have a responsibility. And, what we have always tried to do and what we encourage others to do is to not just do dots on a map, but reach out and show pictures of your loved one. Be vocal and show what this has cost your family, because that they can't ignore. What we have found is even the current administration, when they see a statistic or a dot on the map, they're desensitized to that. You know what I'm saying? But when they see a picture of a little boy, or with Karen, when they hear about her granddaughter, it changes them. It knocks them off a little bit. And that human being comes out, and you realize, okay, wait a minute, you can get to them. And so that is what we are pushing for as we do the Westlake with the other groups, is we're like, bombard this agency, these human beings, get in front of them with your photographs. Maybe it does nothing. Maybe you can't overcome the lobbyists, but you know what? At the end of the day, the one thing the Republican administration and the Democratic EPA administration have in common is ego. They all want to leave a legacy. They have gotten into the positions that they've gotten in, been appointed, and they want to leave, and they want people to remember them.
And personalizing that for folks is really, really important. We're going to touch back on that when we come back after the break with Karen Nickel and Dawn Chapman. This is Arnold Stricker of In Tune. You're listening to KWRHLP 92.9 FM, your community radio station in Webster Groves. Stay tuned to In Tune. Welcome back to In Tune. This is Arnold Stricker with Ellie Wharton. We've been talking to Karen Nickel and Dawn Chapman of Just Moms-STL. And I wanted to read something quickly here and to reinforce with our listeners what's going on there. When Mallinckrodt Chemical ran out of space in their St. Louis location to store waste, they obtained 22 acres near the airport. They put waste there. These barrels and piles were left unattended for decades. They rusted, and along with the toxic waste piles, spilled into neighboring air, soil, and water, most notably Coldwater Creek. In the mid-'60s, the waste was put up for bid, ended up with the Cotter Corporation, and they stored site and dried the waste there on shipping that to Colorado. When the Laddie Avenue site there was cleaned up, it was B&K Construction mixed an estimated 8,000 tons of leached barium sulfate with 48,000 tons of toxic dirt, in which the top 12 to 18 inches of topsoil was removed and transported for 3 months. And that was dumped illegally in the Westlake landfill in Bridgeton, which is now on fire. And so some of that dirt covered up landfill. There is an area out there that has just radioactive waste there. But when I go back, here's the early 60s. 5,000 truckloads of cleanup waste are hauled from Malincrot to the quarry at Weldon Springs. 121,000 tons of uranium residue and waste remained at the airport site in 1965. You go on, you say, let's see here, material that was barium sulfate waste with the topsoil was mixed 5 times. This material was mixed with approximately 5 times as much topsoil, and then it was dumped in violation at the landfill because the person who was dumping it said it was clean fill. This is actually, the waste is only buried 3 feet under the soil, where it was thought to be buried 100 feet under the soil. And many of this didn't come to light until a Post-Dispatch article in 1976 that said 7 tons of uranium was dumped at Westlake landfill. You go on and on and on. In 1980s, waste is found to be eroding into Coldwater Creek. The city of St. Louis refuses to transfer property to the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy claims it has no responsibility for waste at the Westlake landfill site in 1992. It just goes on and on. And my question is, and I'm telling Ellie off air, this is like a typical kick the can down the road deal.
Absolutely. It's a nuclear hot potato.
And why do you think it is that the population as a whole is not screaming very loudly, protesting this? We look at so much foolishness that gets tons and tons and tons of exposure on our social media. Some stupid person doing something just absolutely crazy gets millions of views overnight. And we're talking about issues that are going to impact generations and generations to come. But we don't see the same level of outcry. How do we energize and galvanize our communities?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think one of the issues that we face is that when you find out about this issue, especially if you've been harmed by it, it's a bit different than if you live somewhere in St. Louis, haven't been harmed by it, but are just finding out. Then you're rip-roaring mad and you're ready to run. When you find out about it and you start putting pieces together and you think, oh my God, I was exposed, or my mom was exposed, there is a grieving period. There is a process that we see, and it's like, my gosh, it's a roller coaster. You're angry, you're sad, you start putting faces that you've lost, and then it rips that wound right open again, and then you're grieving. That it is very difficult for these people to fight this issue when A, they've been harmed in the past, and B, they're sick right now in between chemo treatments trying to call their elected officials. But one of the things that we fight, which if you think about it makes sense, for some reason, with this radioactive waste with the Manhattan Project, maybe it's because there's a level of patriotism attached to the Manhattan Project, but this is harder for people to get behind. People think to themselves, you get on your computer right now, and 2 people come down with listeria from romaine lettuce, and suddenly there's articles everywhere, don't eat romaine lettuce, and they're pulling it off the shelf. So in people's minds, their government is there to protect them. But you don't see that same reaction with the Department of Energy or with the government when it comes to this radioactive waste. And that throws people off because it's opposite. It's completely un-American. It's not what people think should happen. And they sit back and they're like, if this was really that dangerous, why wouldn't they tell us? I'll give you a great example. The description Arnold read about the airport piles, that site wasn't even fenced. And the reason that site wasn't fenced is not because that material sitting out in the open next to the airport wasn't dangerous. Of course it was. It was because if putting a fence around it would alert the public and panic them and really notify them of what was there. Do you know people, honest to God, people used to picnic on top of those piles? People would bring their families and blankets and go and hike up those piles and lay the blanket out and sit there and watch airplanes land.
And
and
that was an offshoot of exactly what happened in Las Vegas and in the desert of Nevada back in the 30s when they were testing the nuclear weaponry out in the wealthy people, and I've been to this site. The wealthy people from the Las Vegas area would actually trek up to this little mountain site that overlooked the explosion areas, as I call
Detonation
it,
area.
and it was a big thing. They'd go up there and they would watch the detonation. And so therefore all of the dust and the sand and the air would blow back on them. And they thought they were doing something great. And there was an actual section set up just for these people to go up there and watch the atomic explosions. It was just, I couldn't believe it. But when you also think of how many Westerns were filmed right there in that area, and you go back and you look at what did those actors die of? And one of the best known was John Wayne. What did he die of? He died of cancer. Okay.
Right. And I also think, this is Karen, I think that one of the issues that we have with Westlake and getting people to actually wake up to it is, first of all, it's hard to wrap your mind around. It's very overwhelming. And you have to tell the story of Malincrot, Coldwater Creek, Laddie Avenue. It's a lot to take in. And as Dawn talked about the roller coaster, we see it every single day with every person that we educate on this issue. You can literally see the panic and then the grief and then the mourning and it just and then you're angry and sad and then it's repeat. It starts over. And eventually those people come back and they say, okay, I'm ready to take some more on. I need to know some more. You have to remember that as you were talking, Ellie, about the sites in Las Vegas and whatnot, those were public. Everything that happened here in St. Louis with Malincrot was top secret for a very, very long time. Classified information that not even the workers knew what they were working on. And so while all of these other sites became more familiar, no one, and you will find nowhere where they talk about St. Louis playing the role in the Manhattan Project. We processed the very first teaspoon of this material that was sent out to all of these other places to achieve the victory of the war. And it's kind of still true. You cannot get elected officials. It's very hard to get elected officials to stand up and fight for this issue. We have heard from many. It's political suicide. And they want, in St. Louis, they want to keep the mentality of this being a secret. And the secret's out. A lot of people have been harmed from this stuff and will continue to be harmed from this stuff.
I'll give you another example, and this is probably, there is a group of people, a group of citizens who were outraged from this, that are City of St. Louis citizens that are actually working on trying to get the city to pass and sign a resolution just to clean up the site, not even specific to what cleanup, and to take notice. Do you know that they cannot find a single alderman? They cannot, from the City of St. Louis, from Megan Green to Annie Rice, nobody will touch this, and they are being told point blank to their face that Westlake landfill is a political poison pill. In quotes.
So our politicians, they would They would look at, well, political suicide, citizen genocide. Political suicide, citizen genocide. Well, guess the citizen has to go.
I guess. I mean, and this just happened, and this is recent. This just happened yesterday. This group of people has been trying now for 3 weeks. They have written, and it is an excellent resolution. It is not even pointing fingers. It's just, hey, we have a problem, and we need to step up and protect citizens. The aldermen that you think would be the first to jump on this issue are refusing. They are saying, no, touching Westlake landfill is a political poison pill. And that is, so even after an HBO film comes out, after maps come out, after people come forward with illnesses, a proposed remedy comes out for our site, we still cannot get these people are warriors for other social justice issues across the city of St. Louis. I follow these people on Twitter and Facebook. I mean, they are champions for people, but they are saying Westlake landfill is a political poison pill.
No, I have a question. Why do you think that is? I have an opinion about that, but why do you think
I would actually like to hear your opinion, because I will say that set us off. It kind of knocked us off our foundation, and we're a little off even today because, again, I watch these people tackle these incredible issues, gun violence, you name it, police brutality issues. These are the champions. They're championing, and yet they won't touch this issue. It's like you guys have formed a political platform that deals with political poison pills. That's what you do. That's what you've built your platform off of, and yet ours is too much.
It's not popular because it raises concerns about what has happened in the past, things that we hope will just go away. And this goes back to administration all the way to the Roosevelt administration. Every administration since the Roosevelt administration is guilty as much as any other administration, like the current one. We can go all the way back. Because as I go back and look at the history, everybody passed the buck. Everybody kicked the can. And politicians who don't want to step up and call it like it is, are they thinking it's going to cost too much money? Well, how much money is our lives worth? How much money is it going to cost if the worst case scenario, and I don't like to, you have to plan for worst case scenario because obviously there's a plan in place, right, ladies? If something happens?
There is.
Okay.
Yes, there is.
And so if the worst case scenario happens, how much is that going to cost? What kind of publicity is that going to wreak? And then people will say, why didn't you do something about it if you knew about it? And
right.
and I just think there's too many other quote unquote popular things going on, and maybe it's isolated to a particular area. It's not impacting everybody, although it is impacting everybody. Because if this site, what else is not known? What other site do we not know about? Or how many other people around the country are going to come down with these kinds of illnesses that we don't know why they're coming down with them?
That's right. And, and I find it offensive, and I think it sounds like you guys do too. This is Dawn speaking, that, talk a political poison pill. We're ingesting a real poison pill over here.
That's right.
I mean, so you want to tell me you're being that it would politically poison you to pick up this issue when people are actually being poisoned, and, you want to say it'll hurt your reputation politically? Well, my goodness, Google Karen and I and look at all the paid-for hit pieces that this company paid to put out against us. You don't always, picking these issues up and championing them comes at a horrible price personally. It's difficult, okay? We're in Target with our families, and we get people running up to us just sobbing, telling their story, or we get people screaming at us, you're hurting our property value, and then by the time I get out of the toy aisle down up to the checkout lane, this person's apologizing profusely, and it turns out they have lost loved ones, and they just don't know what to do with the anger and grief. I mean, nobody knows more than Karen and I how difficult it is to pick this issue up and sustain it, and the personal cost. And somebody's telling a group of kids in the city of St. Louis that are trying to protect their city from this regional potential disaster that I can't touch that. That's a political poison pill.
And when we stop and look at some of the issues in North County, with education, with violence and things like that, I mean, do we see any kind of correlation between the, several generations of poisoning and now the outcome of that and, generations down the road? And we know that there have been studies that show that and Sophia, the lady that comes on next with me at 1 o'clock, we have a show, or at 2 o'clock, we have a show where we talk about that collective trauma and how it builds up. It's not something that just happens with your generation. But imagine it's going to be your generation, your children's generation, your children's children, and the children's 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 children. 300 and 400 years later, your families could be looking at, annihilation because of something that happened today.
Mm-hmm. It's very true.
Why don't people see that it's not just an instant, it's not an immediate. We're talking about long-term genocide.
Yeah, you absolutely are. And one of the things that Karen and I have often talked about, and, we simply don't have the time to do it, but it would be very interesting, wouldn't it, for somebody to go and look at North County and look at the amount of bankruptcies and see how many of those are medical bankruptcies. Cancer is expensive. Even people with the best insurance have declared bankruptcy. You see GoFundMes all the time. It's expensive. You miss work. The kids, you're in the hospital getting chemo. Who's watching your kids? This is it. So yes, we absolutely think. And the other thing that we've noticed, there have been studies that talk about radiation exposure and depression. We just unfortunately today woke up to the news of Anthony Bourdain. The suicide rates, the depression rates. Plus, I mean, if you already suffer from depression and you learn about this issue, you're constantly living your life, like you said, wondering if you survived this issue, and you won't know, because even if you survive this issue, will your great-grandchildren?
Exactly. And they were just also talking about, of course, when Kate Spade killed herself earlier in the week, and now Anthony Bourdain, and they were talking about that whole concept of, that there are now, like, the suicide rate in the United States has risen by 25%, not just this year, but over a period of years. We're seeing a larger number of suicides. And, these things, for people like us who are just kind of normal, everyday people, and we always kind of think that, wow, they've got all of that. Look at that. They've achieved world fame. They have more money than sand. They've got recognition. They got all these things that, the average person thinks makes people happy. And here they are killing themselves. And it's hard to fathom, why would they do that? But then when you realize these other situations, Karen and Dawn, like you're talking about, it exacerbates what we're talking about. The poisoning and everything exacerbates an already fragile personality.
I would.
And you know what it does?
Go ahead.
Is it robs them of something that we think is so important, and we try every day. My goodness, we get up in the morning and just pray for the ability to give one person hope. Hope is such a precious thing. This situation, learning you've been exposed, learning your parents have been exposed, it robs you of hope. And that is a very dangerous thing when you are fighting everyday circumstances. And that is something we struggle with every day. How? This is a very serious situation. You can bombard people with the seriousness of it because it's real. How do we give these people hope? Because without hope, there is no fight left in them.
Well, I want to give our listeners some homework. If they want to know more about this, your website, Just Moms-STL, is STLRAD-WasteLegacy.com, STLRAD-WasteLegacy.com. It's a great website, folks. A lot of information on there. Matter of fact, I was on that a couple hours looking at that. Also, just on Wikipedia, Westlake Landfill, great information there. Here's another one, coldwatercreekfacts.com, coldwatercreekfacts.com, because I think one of the biggest things is that the site has been designated for remediation and nothing's been going on.
Right.
And the thing is that this is not just happening here. I'm looking at a picture right now of moms and grandmoms up in Idaho, Boise, Idaho, just this past Tuesday, when Pruitt signed an agreement allowing Idaho to take on regulating pollution discharge into state lakes and rivers. So now they've taken it away from the federal government and put it in the hands of the state. And these people are out here protesting, fire Pruitt. Pruitt protects polluters, protect our water. I mean, again, doesn't it sound like just what we're talking about here? And there they are in Boise, Idaho. So this is something that's going on across the country. And you ladies are to be commended for being the champions in this region and hopefully being able to join with champions in other regions so that our voices can be heard.
Thank you. We appreciate that. We're working really hard. We are working with other groups. We are in a Superfund campaign with Lois Gibbs and some of these other moms from Superfund sites, trying to bring Superfund back and, you know, making it strong like it used to be, bringing back the polluter pays, and just reaching out to these other groups. We too have been to several of these other sites, and it's just horrifying to think about what has happened. And I just want to put out there that we also have West Lake Landfill Facebook page and Just Moms-STL Facebook page. And through our website, you can sign up for our newsletter if you do not do Facebook. And just one more thing I'd like to tell everyone is that the third Thursday of every month, we have and have been for the past 5 years hosting community meetings that Just Moms puts on. We host it, we give updates, and we interact with the community to find out what they're worried about and what they want to see happen and get ideas and what our next call to action is. That happens the third Thursday of every month, and it's held at John Calvin Presbyterian Church in Bridgeton at Natural Bridge and St. Charles Rock Road at 6:30 p.m., and our next one is June 21st.
And Dawn and Karen, if you could send that information to us here at the radio station, you can go on our website and find out where, you know, you should send it. We will post those meetings on our website as well to keep this message and this movement alive.
And Dawn and Karen, I appreciate your time today. This has been great information. It's a sad thing that we have to talk about great information in light of people suffering. But what we want to do is try to keep this at the forefront of people's minds and get some action done. And Ellie and I will do some updates regularly and promote some of the things that you're doing, because we need to stay on top of those things and hopefully see some action by our government to take care of the people that it's supposed to protect. So Karen and Dawn, thank you very much for coming on In Tune today.
Thank you for totally enlightening us. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having us.
Well, folks, that's a really serious deal.
It's somber.
It is very somber.
It was very somber.
And we had contrasting hours. We had a great time with Helen in our first hour, and an informative and somber time in the second hour, because I guess it boils down to, if this was happening to my family and I was a congressman or a senator living right there, or a local city official or a state official that lived right there and it was impacting my family, what would I do? That's what we would expect our officials to do. And that's how they should react in these situations. But unfortunately, they're not doing that.
I think it's important for us to continue to keep this subject matter on top of the file so that we're always talking about it.
We
Thanks,
will do
Arnold.
that. Don't forget, when the Martians invade, there's only one race, the human race, and every one of us have different characteristics and is uniquely valuable. This is KWRH LP 92.9 FM. For In Tune and engineer Christopher Dacey, co-host Ellie Wharton, I'm Arnold Stricker. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, walk worthy and let your light shine.